The development of new antiviral drugs to combat COVID-19 and other coronaviruses is a major scientific breakthrough, one that promises to significantly improve our ability to fight pandemics. Researchers from UCSF and the Gladstone Institutes have created compounds that outperform Paxlovid, the current leading antiviral treatment for COVID-19, in preclinical trials. However, while these compounds show potential, there are significant concerns about their future, particularly in terms of funding, accessibility, and long-term safety. Despite the initial excitement, several warning signs suggest that these promising drugs may not necessarily be the game changer we hope for. The research that led to the discovery of these new antiviral compounds was fueled by the urgent need to prepare for future pandemics. The team at UCSF and Gladstone Institutes focused on inhibiting the major protease, MPRO, of SARS-CoV-2, the enzyme responsible for viral replication. By blocking this enzyme, the new compounds prevent the virus from reproducing within the human body. This is a promising approach, as it targets the virus itself without interfering with human proteins. However, there are considerable challenges in translating this laboratory success into a safe, effective treatment for humans. Firstly, while the compounds have shown strong efficacy in preclinical studies, we must remain cautious. The transition from the lab to real-world application is fraught with difficulties. The compounds may work well in controlled experiments, but once they are administered to humans, we may encounter unforeseen side effects or complications. The history of drug development is filled with examples of treatments that seemed promising in early studies but faltered when tested in human populations. Even more concerning is the fact that these new compounds are still far from being proven safe in humans, as they have not yet completed clinical trials. If the drugs do make it to clinical trials, we must be aware that even successful trials may not guarantee the drug's safety and effectiveness once they are widely distributed. Drug interactions, long-term effects, and varying individual responses all pose risks that cannot be fully understood until these drugs are used at scale. Moreover, the future of these antiviral compounds is uncertain. Despite the exciting results, the funding for their development is under serious threat. The research was initially supported by a grant from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, which was designed to help prepare for the next pandemic. However, that funding has now been terminated, and the researchers are left in a precarious position. Without adequate financial support, the progress made so far could be jeopardized. This is not just a setback for these specific antiviral compounds, but for the broader efforts to improve pandemic preparedness. The termination of funding reflects a broader issue with how the world approaches pandemic research. After the initial shock of the COVID-19 pandemic, there seems to be a lack of long-term commitment to ensuring we are prepared for future outbreaks. If these promising antiviral drugs are not given the resources they need, we risk losing valuable tools that could protect public health in the future. Even if funding is secured and these compounds make it through clinical trials, there is still the issue of accessibility. The development of new drugs is often a slow and expensive process, and even when effective treatments are available, they may not be accessible to the populations that need them most. During the COVID-19 pandemic, for example, the distribution of vaccines and treatments was uneven, with wealthier nations receiving much quicker access to life-saving interventions than low- and middle-income countries. If these new antiviral drugs are priced too high or if production is limited, there is a risk that they will not be widely available. This would limit their ability to mitigate the impact of future pandemics, particularly in less affluent parts of the world. The global distribution of antiviral drugs requires international cooperation and a commitment to equity, and there is no guarantee that this will happen. There is also the issue of resistance. Just as bacteria can develop resistance to antibiotics, viruses can evolve in ways that make antiviral drugs less effective over time. Although these new drugs target a viral enzyme that is essential for replication, there is still a possibility that the virus could adapt to these treatments. The history of antiviral drug resistance is well documented, with drugs like Tamiflu and HIV medications facing challenges as the viruses they were meant to combat evolved. The rapid mutation rates of viruses like SARS-CoV-2 could lead to the development of resistant strains, rendering these new compounds ineffective. This is a fundamental challenge in the fight against viral diseases, and while the new compounds show promise, we cannot assume that they will remain effective in the long term. Additionally, the drug's design could present unforeseen risks. The use of molecular docking and click chemistry to optimize the drug candidates is a relatively new approach, and while it has yielded positive results so far, the long-term consequences of these drugs interacting with the human body are still unknown. Drug development is an intricate process, and even minor changes in the molecular structure of a drug can lead to significant shifts in its safety profile. While the researchers have worked hard to ensure that these drugs do not interfere with human proteases, there is always the possibility of off-target effects, especially when dealing with complex biological systems. Finally, we must consider the broader implications of relying on antiviral drugs as a primary method of combating pandemics. While these new compounds represent an exciting step forward, they should not be seen as a silver bullet. The focus on drug development should not overshadow other critical aspects of pandemic preparedness, such as strengthening healthcare infrastructure, improving surveillance systems, and ensuring equitable access to care. If we become overly reliant on antiviral drugs, we may neglect these other important areas of public health, which could lead to greater vulnerabilities in the face of future outbreaks. In conclusion, while the development of new antiviral drugs by UCSF and Gladstone Institutes is undoubtedly a significant scientific achievement, there are several cautionary notes that must be considered. The risks associated with transitioning from preclinical studies to human application, the uncertainty surrounding funding, the potential for drug resistance, and the challenges of ensuring global accessibility all pose significant hurdles. These factors should not detract from the promise of these new compounds, but they highlight the complex and uncertain nature of drug development. As we look toward future pandemics, it is essential to maintain a balanced perspective, recognizing the potential of these new drugs while also acknowledging the challenges that lie ahead.